D&D Next versus 5e, apparently Thunderdome edition, and I'm here for it. So this came from, I was just itching to look at D&D Next on Friday. I was like, I haven't read this packet in forever. I want to hunt it down, because is it as good as I remembered? Because I played during the entire playtest time of D&D Next. First of all, I found it. I was talking to Mary. I'm like, hey, Mary, check this out. Yeah. I found it.
Because I just got into RPGs at I think this is my 3-year anniversary, and or it'll be 4 years in July that I got into it. And then I just took a dive in, and I have a problem now.
Well, it's like,
but
5th edition's almost 6 years old now. D&D Next was pre-5th edition. You don't get into the hobby going into a playtest. Like that's not how it happens. So if you haven't been in the hobby probably around 10 or more years, you probably have no chance of having experienced D&D Next.
Oh yeah, I'd never heard of it until you talked about it.
The way I put it is D&D Next is actually 5th edition. 5th edition is 5.5. Because 3rd edition ran about 2 years before they went, we got to fix some shit, and made 3.5. 4th edition ran about 2 years before they went, no one wants to buy our books, we need to fix this, and made Essentials, which is 4.5. D&D Next had a 2-year playtest, and then they went, here's what we need to fix, and made 5th edition. It followed the exact same pattern. 5th is 5.5. And what's funny is when we're looking, because we looked at the final playtest packet, because it was a playtest, it was constantly updating. I think the fairest one is look at the last version, the version with the most material, the most refined, before they went, now we're making the push to 5th edition. I think the funniest thing is one of the things notoriously everybody has a problem with 5th edition is the Beastmaster's Animal Companion, which was never fucking playtested because it wasn't in the playtest.
Which shocked me, honestly, because I have.
It's almost like those very glaring issues would have come out in any playtest immediately.
Yeah.
But people openly complained that there wasn't an animal companion option, so they put one in. Are y'all happy? I think the one that shocked me looking back is that is it Feral Barbarian? The Feral Rage? Yeah. The Feral Barbarian still exists.
Berserker.
Yeah, the Berserker. It's basically the same. Well, thematically it's the same. They're one-to-one comparisons.
Totally different.
Way better.
Way better. It makes it more usable, which I have stuff now where I can go to my friend that's barbarian, like tunnel vision, and I'd be like, look, you want to play a Berserker? I can show you how to play.
Here's how we're gonna do it. I think the perfect version is a hybrid between the two, because it's not like Next is
with
absolutely
anything,
perfect.
It's that way.
But stuff like backgrounds gave you 3 skills. I forgot that. Backgrounds were so much bigger. And I love it. Because I think combining 3 skills gives you a lot more nuance and variety than combining 2.
Definitely.
Just with how numbers shift.
One of my favorite things.
They also, what I find hilarious is, not all the backgrounds made it to the player's handbook, but then all the ones that didn't ended up in Sword Coast Adventurers Guild, which means you literally just cut those backgrounds to put in the second book. That's all you did. Because except for the ones that are 100% reliant on Forgotten Realms, all the ones that you can use in other places are in D&D Next. They're all there. D&D Next, you can just be a bounty hunter from the start. You don't got to buy the most worthless D&D book ever made. Yay! But yeah, I don't know if you kept reading it, because we did not go through spells. I wasn't going that deep.
I haven't gotten to spells yet. I just went through the main class options of how they balanced things.
It is balanced. That's what's funny.
It is.
It's not unbalanced, but everybody's more powerful, but also not more powerful. They're more powerful in different ways.
They edited in the wrong ways.
They gave less freedom, honestly.
Yeah.
They made things less loose, and 5th is already a very loose system. If you don't think 5th edition is based more off BX than advanced, read D&D Next, because D&D Next is modern BX. And I love it. They still had subclasses. They still had all of that. Yep. I think they actually just called them subclasses in that. Can you pull that up? Do they all have their own names, or is it just subclass?
No, they were all across, I believe. Let me double check.
Yeah, you have the PDF up, so I'm just going to defer.
Yeah, I have the PDF. get to there, choose a class, and then
I was going to say, I think
Sorry,
wizards were
I'm
called
double-checking.
schools or arcane traditions
Yes.
still. So not everybody
Yes.
didn't
so
have
they
unique
still
names.
had a separation of like
Okay.
what the archetypes were. But what was interesting was I thought they kept fighter and monk of a similar like archetype description of like what they used.
Yeah. Well, actually,
From what I
we'll do
remember
the speed
reading.
breakdown. Some of the most hated options in the player's handbook from 5e,
Yes.
and this universally, and we'll cover them right here. As we said, berserker, barbarian, good in this, like legit
Yes.
good. Feels like a berserker. Animal companion, ranger doesn't exist, which also fits with their answer is always, well, yeah, but if you're not a ranger, you could just buy an animal. Well, now if you want an animal companion, you can
There's
just buy
rules for
an
that.
animal. That was their solution, and now it's universal. It works better, honestly.
Yes.
Way of the Four Elements monk is
It's
good.
usable.
I wouldn't say it's great. It's not like my style, and there's a couple dud options in there,
Yeah.
but they're options and
Water
you can
needs
still
to be reworked.
Water needs
basically.
rework. Water sucks. Water is literally like wind, but 3 levels behind it, which makes no sense. But fire, earth, and wind are all good. And it actually, what's hilarious is the selection choice path is basically the route they ended up going with the Totem Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Way of the Four Elements monk, way better. And you straight feel like you're in Avatar with the options
Yes.
you have. You feel like a bender. You could
I
be
have
the
hate
airbender
towards
and do them
monk.
all.
I would play that monk class.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much hatred towards monks. I'm sorry. Hot take. I don't like monks. I just
One of
don't
the
like 'em.
things I find hilarious is I totally get hate on Mike Merles. I kind of hate Mike Merles now too. But what I find hilarious is there was a point before he was no longer a public face, because we all know why. But there was a point where he even admitted, he's like, if I have to admit anything, I think minor actions were a mistake, because they kind of were. If I could redo it, I actually would have just done it where they're free actions tacked on top of your actions. And he says it like this is an idea that didn't happen. That's how
Yeah.
D&D Next was, and they got rid of
Yeah.
it for minor actions. They even admit, if I could have done it, this would have been better. That's what they were doing. That's how the rogue functions. If you do, anytime you do an action, you get one of these as a free action. Done. Like, let's just do it.
Easy. It's simple.
It's so simple. And yeah, if you think 5th edition is too simple, it's not. 5th edition is simpler than Pathfinder and 3.5, but that's a low bar. All right. 5th edition is secretly crunchy. 5th edition is noodly, is how I like to say it. There's a lot to fiddle with
Yes.
and tweak. And I will say, D&D Next, we've even discussed it, has one combo that is straight up game breaking.
Oh, hard.
If you allow multi-classing, it's paladin, and is it barbarian?
Fighter paladin.
That's right, fighter paladin. If you do the right level combination of fighter and paladin in D&D Next, you cannot be killed except for massive damage or effects that cause instant death. Damage can't kill you because their two abilities synergize in a way where it's impossible for them to fail a save, that if they pass that save, they don't die.
Yeah, they're back up at 1 hit point, but
They're
have to
back
make
up
the
at-
save
yeah,
each
basically-
round. You have to get a DC 15, and it's similar to like how like orc. I believe.
Yeah, it's similar
Half-Orc
to
has
like
this,
orcs
where-
and boars have the thing where like if they would drop, they come back up. It's most like zombies. Zombies have a DC.
Yes.
It's not automatic and it keeps going off. But yeah, fighters eventually get, I think it's at like 9th level or something, get an ability
Yep, 9th level.
where if damage would knock them to 0, they just need to make a DC 15 con save. If they succeed, they're at 1 hit point instead. Paladins still get their bubble that adds their charisma bonus to any save, including their own. And if you have a high enough charisma and con, plus your proficiency, because you're proficient in con saves if you started as a fighter, if you roll a 1, you get a 15, and there's no crit fails on saves, which means you can't die mathematically. That is the one that was glaring. Like, that's something where you would have to make some kind of ruling of like, this is the one save that the Paladin's bubble doesn't work on.
Yeah.
And I think if as a GM I went, it works on everything except this save. Because if it works on this save, the game breaks. Everything else, even death saves, because that's super powerful. But not this one, because if it's this one, the game's going to break. It's not going to be fun. Now, granted, that's also by like 15th level, but also that's by like 15th level, not 20th level, which kind of makes it really
and
early.
let's work party composition too.
Yes.
Is that if you have a frontline fighter,
Oh yeah,
and you have
I'm fine with it if the
paladin.
fighter's next to a paladin and it makes the fighter unkillable because the paladin's killable and then the fighter's killable. But when it's one person, you can't take the bubble down because the bubble is invincible. It makes party composition super powerful, but actually a lot of Next does. There's a lot of interclass synergy if it's multiple people.
Supported strategy decisions in D&D Next. That's one of the main things I loved about, like, just reading through. It made it so, the best way I can say it is a lot of times, at least how I felt with, if you're talking about rules as written, 5th edition. You have a lane, that is the lane you stick in.
Yeah, don't leave your lane.
D&D Next, not that way.
No.
You basically
there's kind of lanes,
two different
but
lanes.
Yeah, you can move around a lot.
But
more.
the lanes are so much wider that
they overlap,
encompass more, and they overlap. It's not like trying to do a war mage. You will get decimated. I'm sorry, it's going to happen.
I want to point out the biggest one for me that I actually totally forgot and I hate, and I even said like I couldn't believe this. One of the things that originally got me into Savage Worlds was the trick action, where any character could make a check to hinder the enemy so the combat-y characters do better, but you don't have to be combat-y. Next has an action called Hinder. You have to be within 5 feet of the target, which makes it rough. Because if you're not a combat-y character, that is rough. But if you're within 5 feet of the target, you can spend your action to hinder them, to cause them to have disadvantage on their attack rolls. It's super simple, and it's one of the basic actions. Anyone can do it. And that means non-combat characters can contribute meaningfully to combat. Even if they're always taking either hinder or aid, first of all, that now means they have 2 options. They can choose what they want to do, and they get to make decisions. They have to decide who they're going to hinder, which matters. And it's like, we'll just hinder the biggest guy. Really? Because you have to be within 5 feet of him. Do you hinder the biggest guy, or do you work with like the ranger who can attack from far and go up and hinder the little guys as the ranger's picking them off, and they have disadvantage on their attacks, which means... Now, granted, that became dodge, where you choose to dodge, and anyone who attacks you has disadvantage. I think giving someone else disadvantage, way more important, way more dynamic, way more options in play. So it's just like, why did that get cut?
Yeah. Also, when you look into dodge, no, this is a personal thing.
Yes.
When you look at ActionCon, unless you're one hit point, you have no healers and you're kind of fucked, no one's going to use their action for dodge.
No, it's monks and rogues.
I'm sorry. There are so many better things that you can do where hinder actually would be something that you can use. And I personally, I like disadvantage and things like that, but at least in how 5th edition works, it doesn't always matter that much.
Oh my God, rogues are so much better. Something I forgot.
Yeah, rogues are amazing in this.
No. Well, first of all, funny enough, rogues, except the assassins, rogues didn't get changed much. I'm going to point something out. If I remember correctly, in Next, the things that reveal you from being hidden is attacking. You can still take other actions and stay hidden. There is nothing stopping a sneaky character from getting close and hindering a target while staying hidden, which is huge for non-combatant rogues. Like, that is massive. And if not, then shift that ruling. Because, that makes... And yeah, we were saying, what's funny is a lot of the classes don't change much. Like, rogue's cunning action, since there's no bonus actions, they're free actions. If you take an action. Stuff like that. The assassin's way cooler. Yeah, the assassin has straight up really cool crafting.
More than just a multi-class option.
Yes.
Which is what I really like. It uses the fact that you can slip into a personality. It makes it So you can actually use your poisoner's kit to craft things. Oh my god.
More than basic poison, which is one of the worst items in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basic poison is outclassed at level 1 and just gets worse from there. But on top of that, or like druids. This is something when I read it, I love. They're masters of shape changing in this. There aren't really circle druids. You're a shape changer. Like that's your key. But when they get high enough level, it's not just we shape change into elementals. I've mastered shape changing. I shape change into other people. Why not? Humanoids are just other creatures. Like if they're not limited to beasts, or if you're already taking the limits off of it just being beasts, add humanoids, because then that makes them really useful when the party goes into a city. All of a sudden, the druid isn't useless if they're out of their element. They have to get high level to do it. But that's another hallmark of how the classes were set up, is as they gained levels, they could their lanes widened. Where in 5th, your lane narrows. The higher level you get, the more focused you become. But next, the higher level you get, the more broad and the more things you can do as a single player, which I really love. Also, by spreading it out wider, it means the power creep actually isn't as bad.
Oh, yeah. And I double checked on Rogue. The thing is making an attack or making noise. If you
can come up with a way to hinder that isn't making noise, you're not out.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
There's a whole section of like the benefits of stealth.
Because here's the thing.
Conditions for stealth. And it says you can stay out of sight. You can use your environment to your advantage. There's heavily obscured and lightly obscured, and those have different functionalities. And then stay quiet.
Yeah.
It represents your ability.
You could 100% be a non-combatant rogue. Because here's the thing. D&D has a strong history with Tolkien.
Yes.
Bilbo was a rogue. He was a non-combatant rogue. He was not a sneak attacky rogue. He was a skill rogue. You could play Bilbo and actually do something in a fight like Bilbo would. I like that. I appreciate that. As someone who loves rogues, I really appreciate that. And that's something we didn't even catch on Friday. We just caught that right now because a lot of rogue hasn't changed. But that one rule and how it interacts with rogue and the rules in stealth. I also love that there's a clear-cut list of things to take you out of stealth they got rid of in 5th edition, because 5th edition stealth is the most nebulous thing in the rules.
Yeah.
It's not like that's a super important rule that we really need. And I don't like crunchy games, but that's a really important rule to have limits on.
Yeah, especially because, like, if you think about it, certain GMs, like, if you're not checking into multiple RPGs, you're, like, sticking to one, it's hard to come up with that call right away. It's nice to have that kind of description to know how to make the call instead of, like, nebulous, like, yeah, sure you can, or maybe you can't, or it depends on the table. Like, that's where it becomes difficult. There's a lot of well-explained options, I think, in D&D Next that helps give ideas of like how you would use skills. That's one.
Honestly, D&D Next is
reading through the abilities.
D&D Next is more new user-friendly than 5th edition was.
Definitely.
And 5th edition is very new user-friendly. Like, that's not a dig, but D&D Next was to bring people into the game.
To me, it was DM-friendly.
It was. Very much.
Because 5th edition at times can be hard to DM.
When you get in the higher levels, it becomes a problem. I don't think Next is going to be much better. Oh, here's a funny one you might not realize for Next. We did. D&D Next proficiency bonus starts at +1. It still reaches +6, but you start at +1 at level 1 and 2. You want to talk about your character doesn't become a full character to level 3 is even more in D&D. Oh, I will say, I actually hate that mentality of my character's not a full character to level 3. No, your character's always a full character if you're playing them well. But if you want to talk about like you don't have your full suite of abilities, oh yeah. It's or how about the expertise in Next? Expertise is so fucking good in Next. And it makes so much sense. It's not double your proficiency, it's a flat +5. But the thing is +5, while it sounds amazing, and it is, it lowers the difficulty DC by 1 step. Because D&D Next, honestly, D&D Next feels like it was written by one group, which is a big problem with the player's handbook, where it feels like it was written by 4 separate people and then stitched together. D&D Next Expertise is written in a way where they understand how the DC and bounded accuracy system actually works very well, because +5 is actually a magic number in that.
I would say one thing that's cool with DCs, especially if you look at Fighter, it makes Battlemaster Fighter actually worth playing. Sorry, I am part of that minority that hates Battlemaster.
Here's the thing.
Battlemaster
I love
so much.
I love Battlemaster Fighter as an archer. I love them as a trick shot archer. Nobody runs them that way. But having an archer that can disarm people from a range.
That's not my idea of it.
Oh no, it's not my idea of a Battlemaster. I wouldn't even call them a Battlemaster. They're a trick shot. They're a sharpshooter. They're an expert archer. But like being the guy that can like disarm the big bad from the back of the room is so fun.
Oh yeah. It's great. I just love, like, especially like when looking at Fighter, what the DCs are based off of. It's not based off of N, it's based off Constitution.
Let's remember here's a big thing. Most of Fighter doesn't have DCs. You roll versus their score.
Yeah, that is true.
You make a roll. Like, you roll a D6 versus their attribute modifier. Yeah, they're not a spellcaster, so they don't have DCs. Was the mentality. They homogenized it. Where, well, if we're using DCs, everybody uses DCs. Fighters didn't. The very end of Fighters finally got one thing with a DC, but most of Fighters, whatever the Battlemaster did, it targeted a different attribute. You rolled your superiority die, and if you rolled higher than their modifier on the attribute, you succeeded.
Equal to or greater. Yeah.
Which actually made, once they got that D10 on the superiority die, holy crap, I didn't think about that. They're deadly.
Yeah.
Because it was just we add effects.
And that's the Weapon Master, which is what it was called then.
Yeah. Because the Battle Master has a lot of, and you add this dice to damage, because if we didn't add it to damage, people complain. And the Weapon Master doesn't. The Weapon Masters, I add effects to the things I do. I'm already dealing the damage. Now I make it fancy.
Yeah. It's what I love so much is, for me, the Weapon Master, Battle Master, it's the kernel in the game. It's someone that looks at the battlefield and knows where to put his pawns. You don't get that aspect to me in 5th edition, at least how I've played it or how I've seen it played.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I like 5th edition.
I do.
I don't hate 5th edition.
I run two 5th editions games a week. I love 5th edition. I'm a type of person that I'm critical of anything I love. I want to see it at its best level.
Oh, what? You mean people can be critical of the things they love and then they have to walk away from the things they love? What? That doesn't blow up in people's faces at all. Ooh. Oh, no. I'm going to be talking about this for like a year. But, yeah, and here's a funny thing. All right, first of all, I kind of hate that Wizards tried to bury Next once it was gone. Yeah. It is their property and they can do what they want. I will say openly, this is the one game I'm totally cool with somebody going and pirating. It was available for free. It was always free. It is a vital piece of the history of Dungeons and Dragons. The fact that they try to make it like it never existed kind of sucks. Here's the other cool thing, though. As long as you're okay with not having a bunch of extra books and extra supplements, we actually should probably see if monsters from 5th edition work okay without modification, because I kind of get a feeling they would. It might be a little more dangerous, but I like a more dangerous game. Just because the proficiency curve is different.
Stats, so I go crazy with mine.
Just low-level monsters might be different because nothing has a +1 proficiency, and first 2 levels you do.
But that's an easy.
I wouldn't change it.
Monsters,
I wouldn't change it. They're just deadlier.
Yeah, just match their stats. Look at your player stats. Look at the monster stats. Look at their proficiencies. Easy. It's so easy to modify monsters. We have to talk about that sometime.
Oh, we will. Reskinning is a huge thing for me. But no, the thing I was getting into is, let's face it, a lot of people have issues with Wizards of the Coast. Yeah. Honestly, you need to have issues with Hasbro, because the problems come from Hasbro, and they always have before they bought Wizards of the Coast. That's why I was never shocked. But like, if you don't want to support Wizards of the Coast, but you still want to play D&D, dig up D&D Next on the Trove. Like, it's right there. Look under 4th edition, because it existed before 5th. So most places that categorize it, they put it in 4th. So it's kind of buried. It's hard to find. I found it in like 20 minutes. It didn't take that long. But dig it up. It's free. It was given out for free. It never had a price tag on it. So I have no qualms with taking it. It's a full game. It's a pretty awesome game. It does not have warlocks. I guess we should mention that. There's no warlocks.
It doesn't have sorcerers either.
No, they have mages. There is one caster that encompasses all of them, because that's how classic D&D was.
Mm-hmm.
And they 100% had lined that up when you look at how it was built with the wizardry as a class ability, where they were set up where there were books to swap out wizardry without changing the whole class. And it's like, why didn't we? I would have loved that so much more. But yeah, this is rough things. We may do an even bigger thing on next. I don't think we're done talking about next. I think we're going to play next at some point.
Like, there's feats. There's
oh yeah, we need to touch on feats.
Abilities.
Because the feats are so good in D&D Next.
Yes.
Arcane Archer is the shit. It is why I remember D&D Next. It's why I wanted to look up D&D Next. Because Arcane Archer is one of my favorite feats because it is so simple. Mm-hmm. You can now cast spells onto your arrows, and wherever they land is the point of origin of the spell. You have to be proficient in bows, and you have to be able to cast at least first level spells. You have to be able to do both things. All the feat lets you do is combine them into one thing. And then they went, people love the Arcane Archer, but some people thought that was too powerful. So now it's a fighter subclass that blows. Because the fighter Arcane Archer, like I've seen people play it and you can have fun with it. You can have fun with anything in D&D. But it's so limited.
Yeah, it's rough to say the least. I've had to be the person that would run the person's character sheet, and it's just, unless it qualifies under like A, B, or C,
and you only get like 2.
Screwed. Yeah,
you only get like 2, and then you're not special.
That you're able to do don't match what other people can.
Yes.
Like, why wouldn't you just play a ranger?
Oh yeah,
because you could just play a ranger and do the same exact.
Well, yeah, but as a ranger, you can't like cast fireball on your arrow and shoot it, because I do think they gave them fireball. Like, obviously, everybody wants to put fireball on an arrow. It's like, no, as a ranger, I do volley of arrows, where I attack everybody in the area.
There's the lightning. There's a
yeah, because rangers also do get the spells where literally the spell's built to cast on. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I was more talking about they even have a class ability where they're just like, I want to attack everybody in an area anyways. And it's not a spell. It doesn't use up resources. It's volley.
Swordbreaker is the one. Yeah. And then, but yeah, there's literally ranger spells that let you do it. Play a freaking ranger. One of my things, like when a character brings, at least for my table, when they bring a class idea and I hate it, I'm going to make changes to it. But I am a homebrew GM. It's one of my greatest assets and one of my downfalls at times, because some of my games are little test subjects, but I love them dearly. And then they tell me whether they like it or not. And then I add it to the treasure trove of ideas.
So we need to make a game where there's 5 players. It's got to have 5 players, because it'll be called the Next 5. And it's us just doing like D&D Next with a few additions from 5th edition.
Yes.
And to be like, well, we're running D&D. This isn't 5th edition. No, it's D&D Next. Fuck you. This is fun. This game's so fun. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, there are a few things. Like, D&D Next isn't perfect, everybody. The Ranger is a perfect example of this. The Ranger subclasses have no archery. Like, technically, the abilities could be used with a bow, but the options you're given, you'd be screwed using a bow. So it's like, they need to bring the Archer Ranger in. The Hordebreaker stuff needs to have archery options.
Yeah, Hordebreaker, because it's only basically like it typically requires it to be melee attacks.
Basically, they have Whirlwind, but they don't have.
It would work better.
They have Whirlwind, but they don't have Volley. That's the big thing. And in 5th, you get to pick Whirlwind or Volley. Honestly, I would be okay being it like a lot of the others. You get both. Mm-hmm. If you're picking the Hordebreaker character, you're always the multi-attacking character, you get both. If you have an arrow, you can fire a bunch of arrows. If you're in melee, you can Whirlwind. Because you're not going to do them back. I mean, someone might do them back to back, especially like a haste spell, but also, that's fucking awesome. Like, imagine someone with a haste spell who can move like crazy. And they go, all right, so for my first turn, I'm going to volley all of them with arrows as I'm running up to them. And I can move double my speed. I get up to them. I drop my bow as a free action. I draw 2 swords as my item interaction. Now I Whirlwind everyone. That is fucking cool. And I'm not a power gamer, dude. Like, I tend to play some pretty high energy games, even when it's not D&D. It gets goofy. But like, That's fucking cool. Why are you making that face?
I'm not a power gamer, but I do like to optimize the shit out of my characters.
You're a power gamer. Admit it. Admitting is the first step to recovery.
I'm a power gamer. I'm sorry, I am. But it could be so much more.
The thing is Next doesn't actually play into power gamers as much as Fifth. Now, granted, Fifth originally, when it was just the PHP, also didn't play into power gamers. They've slowed their bloat, but the bloat is bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Warlocks be broken.
Oh, warlocks are so broken.
Palalox are nuts.
I have one in my Wednesday game. I have a Hexblade Warlock mixed with a Paladin. I can't remember what kind of Paladin he chose, but yeah, I love you, Sinestra, but you're killing me slowly with making everyone make their saves and then pelting my people with Eldritch Blast. That's
when you have 4 Cyclopses show up that have the ability to summon lightning versions of their boulders so they don't need boulders near them. I may have done this. To be fair, I may have done this in a campaign where it ended up focusing all on one player because I did full random for loot. Just whatever came up, came up. And our Dwarven War Cleric got a belt of Storm Giant strength. You want to talk about what's hard to bounce a game around? Having somebody have 40 strength who's melee built. Yeah.
Been there.
It was fun. I actually sent him on a quest where he had to get the hammer too, because he was actually the reincarnation of Thor and didn't know it. Because we already had set up that like the gods were Norse based, and like Loki was after him. Like Loki tricked Thor into becoming mortal, and all. Like I had a whole bunch of lore for this that they were like finding on like frescoes of broken temples and shit. Oh, it was so fucking fun. This is the same game where one of my favorite D&D fights ever happened. They had an airship. I tend to give parties airships.
They're fun.
They had raided a lizard folk temple. And they had, like, they were running out of the temple with a cart full of gold. Their plan was to hitch the cart up with ropes to their airship. Because also, it wasn't a massive airship. The way I described it is it's the Winnebago from Spaceballs, but for D&D. It's a Winnebago-sized airship. So they're also like, this can't go. I'm like, they're like, they had invested in like rappelling ropes so they could just drop down instead of finding places. So they brought the rappelling ropes down and hooked 4 ropes up to hoist it up. And they're there helping, and lizard folks jumped on and they cut 2 of the ropes. So I was having a melee fight on this cart full of gold as it's swinging because ropes are missing, as someone's flying the airship around the jungle trying not to crash, but anytime they curve, it would accentuate swings. That was a fight I had, and that is one of the coolest fucking fights. Like, that's one of those I'm not going to top myself.
That is so fun.
That was as pulpy as I think I've ever gotten.
See, pulp fights are so much fun.
So fun.
Especially when you can pull them off. Oh my gosh. It's like moments you remember, like when my players decide that the best way to stop a horrible some side of curse or end of the world type magic thing to happen is to just destroy it instead of like stopping the person casting it. You know, it's fine.
Hold up. Next is simple enough because there's still a good bit of options. Don't get us wrong. Yes, like Cleric has 3 subclasses. Rogue has 2 subclasses. Like there are subclasses in every class. Mm-hmm. It's enough for like one solid campaign at least. Especially if you have players who are willing to. You don't need to have special mechanics to be special. We'll have a discussion about that one day. But
yes,
with how streamlined it is, I wonder if that would translate to a modernish game better.
I think so.
Do like an Unsleeping City type game with that. But honestly, I would go almost Eberron minus all the baggage of Eberron. Because here's the thing. The playtest also has Warforged.
Very true.
You could just do... The playtest has Warforged. The playtest has Halflings and Kinder. Because the playtest has stuff specifically in its notes to run Dragonlance with it. Mm-hmm. More shit people forgot. But like, if we run like kind of an Indiana Jones pulpy game with that...
That would be cool.
It'd be fucking fun. I'd have to import the guns from the actual DMG, because I don't think it has guns.
I don't believe so.
But
that, again, it's easy to kind of transition. You see how they set things up. You can know how to do the damage.
Because of the shift of the proficiency bonus. There we go. Because of the shift of the proficiency bonus too. Like by level 3, you're kind of like level 1 and 5th. By level 4, you're about level 3. At level 5, you get kind of close, but you're like 4.5. Which also means you can get that low-level game feel for longer. Which I feel like an Indiana Jones type game you kind of need, because Indy didn't face large groups. Like there were a lot of like small fights. So you do that, but you add the vehicle rules, which vehicles are in that book too. We just change them to modern vehicles. I love that the folk hero is what it used to be, the commoner. Sadly, it is not the version of the commoner that was my favorite. I will note that. And I had told you about this because I distinctly remember it, because I had a problem. I didn't really have a problem with it, but I had a problem where when we were playtesting, every game we ever ran, they always made sure one person took commoner, because commoner used to come with a horse and cart. Didn't really come with anything else, but came with a horse and cart and like land vehicle proficiency. So they're like, somebody's taking this, so we don't have to buy a horse and a cart. If you die, you can make a new character. We still get to keep the horse and cart. It's cool.
Yep, it's fine.
It's fine. And I kind of love that it's a commoner. And it's a table of like, what was your job before you're a hero? You want to play the farmer that became a hero? 5th edition doesn't actually do that. The closest you have is
Samwise.
Yeah.
Play Samwise Gamgee.
The closest you can have an actual 5th is you play the folk hero that already had Samwise's adventure and now is starting 5th edition. Where next, you can just be Sam.
And what's really cool about the background of that is that not only do you get like you're more friendly with commoners and like sit next to you and be able to talk to you, they hide you from
the law.
Guards.
Yeah.
That's something that isn't. And what's so cool is that with the background, specifically in D&D Next, it makes it so there's specialties. Like there's like, this is a perk that differentiates your character from other people, and it helps produce roleplay and backstory and just storytelling in general, because like, look, the hiding from the law is a great storytelling moment. Bounty hunter, great storytelling moment.
I fucking love Bounty Board.
So many of them. The thug, great storytelling.
That's another one I had. Like, someone always picked thug. What's your perk? People are too scared of you to tell the cops. That's all it is, but that is a really good perk. Like
their version of Urchin is so much better too.
There's one problem with their version of Urchin. It does not come with a pet mouse.
That's easy. That's an easy fix.
Everybody gets a pet mouse.
Everybody gets a pet mouse.
Done.
It's fine.
I'm sorry, that's Urchin's my favorite just because I get to start with a pet mouse. I mean, I also then get to basically multi-class rogue no matter what class I take, and I'm a rogue player, so like...
But what's so great is that D&D Next version actually does that.
Yeah.
Instead of just says, you can navigate any city, it's like, no, you can literally just become a rogue. It's fine.
This is something really worth noting for comparison. In 5th edition, the Urchin does come with proficiency in Thieves' Tools. And you start with like this map that gives you shortcuts. In Next, you come with proficiency in Thieves' Tools and the Disguise Kit. And you start play with a set of Thieves' Tools and a Disguise Kit in the starting gear for Urchin. Like, it's not just kind of multi-classing. It is the assumed way to multi-class if you're not going to use the full multi-classing rules. The Bounty Hunter is multi-classing Ranger. Like, definitely. It just is.
What's really nice, too, with the Guild Thief, which is their version of Urchin, they get Thieves' Cant.
Yes.
That's their ability. They just know it because they've lived in the city that long.
Which I actually really love.
Who to go to.
Because their ability is essentially a ribbon ability. Let's be honest, Thieves' Cant's pretty worthless. But that's because they also start with some very expensive gear and 2 very good tool proficiencies. So they actually balanced it out. Oh my God, what?
Yeah. But like the backgrounds here versus backgrounds in 5th edition open more options for storytelling.
I feel like they nerfed
100%.
the things down to just pure ribbon abilities, whereas the ones in Next are class abilities. Like, they just are. Some are, like Thieves' Cant, are straight out of a class. Some are like, you can perform minor crimes and never be reported on it. That's more than a ribbon. Technically, that's a ribbon ability, but the mechanical weight of that is way more. It's so freaking cool.
The Jester with Licensed Fool.
That is actually the exact same in Sword Coast. They have Licensed Fool in Sword Coast.
I don't know much about Sword Coast, so
I sadly do. Again, that book sucks. Like, here's the thing: if you love the Forgotten Realms and you want a book of fluff about the Forgotten Realms, and like you enjoy reading about the Forgotten Realms and don't want to just do it for free on a wiki where all the same information is, then yeah, it's cool. Because the problem is, it's like this much of the back of the book is anything for the game. The rest is fluff. It was a book of fluff. It was their first attempt at how can we put out books without there being bloat, and their first try is put out books that are like 90% fluff with only a couple player things in them. So we trickle feed, and I'm pretty sure with those they were going to put more books out because it was a smaller book, but it was the size of a Splat book, but only came in hardcover.
Yeah.
So it was more expensive because hardcover is more expensive, and issues like that, it bombed. All right, we've been talking about Next for almost an hour, so I think if we're going to talk more about Next, it'll be a different video. So we're just gonna be done with Next.